This afternoon, I had the pleasure of interviewing Will Akin, who is the Clay County Sheriff. He is a great guy to talk with and had plenty of insight on what to do if you're involved in an accident. He gave information as to what to do if you're involved in a minor accident or something more substantial in which there may be serious injuries. I'm excited for you all to see this.
My name is Will Akin. I'm the Sheriff of Clay County.
And I looked it up. You've been the Sheriff of Clay County since 2021, is that right?
Yes, January 1st, 2021, after I got elected in November of 2020.
Yep. And I watched some videos about your backdrop. You have an awesome story, and honestly, I'm really excited to be sitting with you and to talk about this stuff. The reason that we invited you to come to our office and talk is that we do firm case reviews, and at one of our case review meetings, we had brought up the discussion of what should people do from public safety perspective, from an officer's perspective, if they're involved in an accident. And when we at the office are talking about it and have different opinions, I assume that society may have different approaches and opinions. So I thought if we could talk about it and you could enlighten us as well as people that are tuning into this, it'd be awesome.
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head when you said societal view, right?
Yeah.
So whenever, in my experience, and I've been in law enforcement for just over 20 years actually, the last 10 and a half years with the Sheriff's Office, but whenever someone is in a car crash on a roadway, that is a very intense time in their life because they just went through a traumatic event. And so the first thing they want to do or they think about is, oh my gosh, my property's been damaged. I need to call the police. When in reality, the first thing that needs to happen is concern for their safety and the safety around themselves. So if we can just make the scene safe by moving themselves from the roadway and not really focusing on property damage, that would help law enforcement out tremendously because, there have been times in the last 20 years, like I said, in my experience, where people have actually been hit by cars because they're so concerned with their property that they're not paying attention to the other cars that are driving by. And if you think about it, the other cars, they see a car crash, they see a wreck. They're not focusing on the people that are around, they just see a car crash. So they're not paying attention to what they should be paying attention to, and that's the road.
Yeah.
And people have been hit by cars.
That makes total sense. And we've all talked about rubbernecking,
Yes.
where accidents on the other side, but you have a traffic jam on the other side of the highway just simply because people are looking at the accident, not where they're supposed to be going.
That just jarred my memory. I was a 3 or 4 year officer with Phoenix Police Department responding to a crash on a two-way road, but it was like a frontage road, so it was really narrow. And as I was approaching low speed, probably like 25 miles an hour to the car crash scene, there was another car that was making a right-hand turn, but looking at the car crash, which was to the left, they didn't see me coming, and they committed. By the time I slammed on my brakes, we made impact, low-speed impact, and we've caused a scene at a scene because they were paying attention to the car crash and not driving.
Now blocking the entire road,
Yes.
2 accidents instead of 1.
Yeah.
So I guess if you will, there's probably a draw all the time. There's probably a continuum of seriousness of accidents. So let's talk about first the least severe accident. 2 cars hit each other, but everybody seems to be fine. What would generally be the advice that you'd give to people in that situation?
Number one is be patient, be calm. Everyone wants to place blame in a situation like that, or what seems like everyone wants to place blame, but it might be just something that, hey, look, I wasn't paying attention. The best case scenario there is to exchange information, and if there's enough damage, which nowadays with newer cars, a simple fender bender may cause thousands of dollars worth of damage because of how a vehicle is made. So exchange information, insurance information, exchange driver information, and then pass it on to the insurance companies.
Okay.
I always recommend passing it on to the insurance companies because those individuals who try to work it out themselves doesn't always work out well. And then somebody says, no, it wasn't my fault, and now you've kind of created another issue by not turning it into the insurance company. Now you're duking it out in the court in small claims court.
Yeah.
Because somebody wants to push blame.
Well, I imagine that accidents that you've come onto, people are stressed out, they're angry at each other, they're escalating the situation just by their mannerisms.
Yes.
Right? So when you say be calm and be patient, you're talking about the driver with the other driver who may have hit them?
Yes.
Okay. When is it appropriate then that because you hear mixed information, sometimes especially in inclement weather, law enforcement will put out notifications, make sure to report this later, make sure that you're safe, and then you can come to the police department later. Basically, they bog down the system if every single officer was called for every single accident.
Oh, man.
So when is the appropriate time to call law enforcement and leave the vehicles there versus getting off the road, exchanging information, and leaving?
Yeah, that's a great question. The appropriate time is going to be when the vehicle is disabled. If you, let's just say a rear end collision, okay? Somebody rear ends another vehicle. If one of those vehicles or both are disabled because, let's just say, one of the airbags deploys, the kill switch is engaged, and the vehicles just can't be moved, leave the vehicles on the roadway. If you can safely set out flares, if you have flares or road triangles to prevent people from coming right up on the vehicle, excuse me, and potentially creating more of an accident or wreck. Ultimately, if you have to leave the vehicles on the roadway, take yourself away from the car crash scene. So let's just say it's in the roadway, it's near the curb of the roadway. Give yourself enough room to be away from that scene in the event that somebody is not paying attention. Or let's say for this scenario, worst case for this scenario, a drunk driver is coming up and they're not paying attention and they end up crashing into those cars, pushing one of those cars into where you're gathered. Give yourself enough space because sometimes you're not going to see. The reason why I say that is because we've actually had deputies in their car working a car crash scene where vehicles were disabled and a drunk driver crashing right into them at high speeds.
Yeah.
And they were in the car. So yeah, that happens to us. It can very easily happen to somebody who is just out there trying to get home from work.
When you say that, I think it drives home the point that people aren't paying attention, because I'm sure if an officer's working a scene that lights are on,
yes,
right, you would imagine that it's probably the most visible thing in the road and people still aren't seeing it. So, and that's not even to mention other situations like tow truck drivers getting hit.
You're right.
When a car may even be in the median. So when you're saying if cars are disabled, get off, you mean like really get out to the grass.
Get off into the grass.
Yeah.
Don't, it's almost natural for us to feel like once we step into the grass that we're safe.
Yeah.
But your car's only 3 feet away from you because you've pulled off into the shoulder of the roadway. Now I'm talking about give yourself 15, 20 feet.
Okay, that makes total sense.
Yeah, because, if there's a car that's disabled and another vehicle hits it at, let's just say, 45 miles an hour, well, depending on the size of that vehicle and physics, that car might get hit and it might travel 30 feet over to the side, or, if it hits the other vehicle and it just turns it, you just have no idea where it's going to go.
Yeah.
So keep yourself as safe as possible.
That makes total sense. So let's escalate it a little bit. Let's have a situation in which we've got more than just property damage and somebody's feeling some pain. Maybe they think they're injured in some capacity. At what point do you say you just need to stay put, EMS needs to get there? Where's that triggering moment?
So for me, and I'm not a medic by any means, I'm not a doctor, but I would say if there is any reason to believe you have a neck injury, if you have a neck injury and you have to, we're fortunate that we're so close to a hospital, right?
Yeah.
So the ambulance will come, medics will give treatment, they'll stabilize your neck, your C-spine, and they'll transport you to the hospital where x-rays can be taken. So if there's no reason to get out of the vehicle, then stay there, right? So, and those kinds of collisions, they're going to get law enforcement to respond very quickly, because now it's a matter of life safety, not just property preservation. So if there's a neck injury, then stay there. Now, I say this, if you can stay there safely as possible, go ahead. But if it's like rush hour traffic and there are thousands of cars passing you because they're either going north or south on, let's say, 291 or even 152, 35, if you can move and get out of your car safely, then I would suggest doing that. Because if your car is disabled and it's not stopping or slowing down the traffic that's passing by you, again, those rubberneckers, they're going to look and they could potentially hit you again, further causing more damage than you've already sustained in an injury.
Yeah.
So if you can safely, go ahead and move. Now, as a side note, just because you feel pain in your neck doesn't mean that you have a neck injury. It could be something as simple as whiplash. Now, I say simple. There's a lot to whiplash, but you don't necessarily have a broken neck, right? I've learned through training overseas that just because you're complaining of a neck injury doesn't mean that we're not going to move you if there's gunfire hailing overhead. We're going to move you. Bleeding is more of a problem than a neck injury. So, kind of a segue into that, bleeding. If you have sustained a head injury or any other kind of injury, specifically head injury, like if, unfortunately, there are people who still don't wear their seatbelts.
Yeah.
If their head crashes into the windshield and they're bleeding profusely, stop the bleeding. Stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
But those kinds of, like I said, those kinds of crashes, law enforcement's going to be there very quickly. It's going to stop all the rest of the cars, and all the cars, it's just going to back up. So it gives you time.
Well, that makes sense. And I will tell you, in my experience, when I've seen accidents in Liberty, the time it takes for officers to get there, even in the non-injury cases, is extremely quick.
Very quickly.
Do you have any idea what sort of time frame people are generally going to wait?
Oh, man. Okay, so it's hard to determine if a car crash is just a fender bender. Now, if it's something in a big box store parking lot or something like that, and somebody was backing up and accidentally hit the front or the rear of your car, that's okay. That's probably going to be a very simple crash, collision. But we never know what it's going to be on the roadway. So in our mind, if we hear car crash on such and such road, we respond to it as if there is life at risk.
Yeah.
Right. So if there's serious bodily injury, if there's any inkling of somebody potentially losing their life, we're going to respond very quickly.
Yeah.
So to your point, in Liberty, they respond very quickly. And in most municipalities, they will respond very quickly. But you also have the Clay County Sheriff's Office, right? So if Liberty's responding and we hear it and they're, let's say, blacked out because they're responding to other calls, they would ask us for assistance. Much like Kansas City would and any other municipality in Clay County.
Okay.
Or let's just say we're passing by and we are the first to arrive. Even though it's in a municipality, we're still going to assist because it's about life safety.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Sort of like collaboration.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it seems like there may be situations in which somebody's experiencing such pain that they should stay in their car, but you're saying if they can safely do it and they're going to be medically capable of doing so, get off the road.
Well, so if the cars are immobilized, if they won't move, if it's a neck injury or any other, I mean, everything is based off of the individual. If you have a high pain tolerance, you may not feel the neck injury, and oftentimes people won't feel whiplash until 2-3 days later when the adrenaline wears out.
Yeah.
They may not feel it right there. So if someone is saying, I feel it right now, then it's probably pretty serious. And so I would say don't leave your vehicle. Hopefully everything will respond accordingly. Like it's like the trend, right? If there's a car crash, people stop, they assess, sometimes people get out, a lot of hazard lights come on, and it really slows everyone else down. Well, by the time law enforcement gets there, hopefully they'll be safe. And that's really typically what we see. But if it doesn't feel safe to the person who was crashed into or involved in the crash, get out of your vehicle and move to the side of the road away from there. Then go ahead and lay down in the grass or something like that if you feel like you have an injury.
That makes total sense. And we talked just briefly before we started this, we talked about making reports to police departments. Is it always necessary if there's a minor no injury case to make a police report?
Oh, this is, okay, so everyone, like I said, wants to call the police because they were in a car crash. If there are no injuries and it's a simple fender bender, then exchange information. There's really no need for law enforcement to get involved. And I think the reason why the mindset exists that they want law enforcement involved is because someone wants someone else to be blamed for the car crash. We're not in the business of establishing blame. right? So that's why I say exchange information and pass it on to your insurance companies and let them deal with it.
Okay.
We pay a lot of money every month for car insurance. Let your car insurance company do their job.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's escalate the accidents a little bit more. Sometimes we have airbags are deployed, maybe there's blood, and maybe there's broken bones even. In that sort of situation, expectation would be call the cops, stay in your car, let EMS get out there. Is that fair?
Yes, absolutely. Substantial injury, broken bones, bleeding, all that stuff, definitely call law enforcement. It's not, quote unquote criminal in nature. It might still just be an accident, but the reason why we want to be called is because we want to prevent any further injury from happening in the process of cars driving by, rubbernecking, whatever the case may be. But when we respond, we're able to control the situation more than anyone else can because we know how to respond. We're going to not just drive up behind the car. We're going to give ourselves a lot of space. We're going to have the blue and red lights on, and we're going to be directing traffic at that point. So when the ambulance gets there, they can go straight to working on the person that needs medical assistance. And if they need to be transported to the hospital, then there are no challenges, no obstacles for them. They get the person on the stretcher, they put them in the back of the ambulance, and they are gone.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why we want law enforcement to be called, so we can control the situation, the scene, and prevent any further damage or life being threatened.
That makes sense. Something that I haven't fully known the answer to is why is it that the fire trucks almost always show up first, and how do you all know on your end how many officers and who all needs to go out to the accident?
Well, it's if the fire department gets there first, they're going to radio back to dispatch, and they're going to say, hey, look, for XYZ, we need, and they're not going to ask for a specific number because they don't know who is available. So they'll just say, hey, we need law enforcement out here to assist with traffic control. Well, if they just say a general dispatch goes out and says, hey, fire needs assistance at such and such location, then the person who's working that area will answer up if they're available. If not, then someone else will. But if there are many units available, they'll all go and they'll make the assessment themselves. And then if it's only one car that's needed, great, they only have one car. If it's perhaps two cars because it's a 3-lane highway or something like that, then what they could do is offset with each other and block 2 lanes of traffic to let fire and EMS do whatever they have to do to save life.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and then what we do is we just control the traffic coming in, and really it's kind of giving them space but also slowing traffic down so they don't hit someone else or hit something else.
Yeah, it seems like, and we've kind of touched on it throughout several points here, is that sometimes the bigger issue is what's going on around the accident, not even necessarily the accident itself.
Yeah.
As officers are coming to an accident, you always see the lights and you hear the sirens, and people are going every which way. Is there a general rule of like what people should do to get out of the way so officers can make it to the accident?
Yeah. Okay, so when you're driving along and you see law enforcement behind you, fire, EMS, you see the lights going, you finally hear the siren, right?
Yeah.
Because, sometimes if the wind is blowing just right, if you have the radio turned up just loud enough, you're not going to hear the sirens. But if you're checking your mirrors and driving like how we're supposed to, defensively driving, you're going to see that there are lights behind you.
Yep.
We typically ask that everyone pulls to the right. Okay, but there are some people who don't know which way to pull out of the way because they might be in the second lane, and there might be cars over here who don't respond how we want them to.
Yeah.
The best thing to do is to stay calm. Okay, just because the lights are going off behind you and you hear the sirens, yeah, this is chaotic, but we are in control of that vehicle. We're not going to proceed until it's safe. That is our obligation to our community.
Yeah.
And so if somebody has to pull off to the left, then okay. I mean, I've had in situations where cars have parted the sea, and I would just go right down the middle at like 3 miles an hour until I know I'm safe, and then I proceed, and I go through. So if people, look, just stay calm. And if you go to the left as opposed to the right, just make sure you do it safely. Let us go through and then resume regular activity.
It's probably the coolest thing to see when everybody actually works in tandem and everybody gets out of the way. No one's going to go by. Okay, so the conversation gets a little bit morbid here because there's, of course, some accidents, in fact, one recently in which there was a fatality.
Yeah.
Right? And, of course, we're not asking what that person should do if they're injured to the extent they're either have or going to pass away. There's not anything they can do. But what things can be done by that person beforehand to make sure that their family members or their loved ones are notified, to make sure that they get the message there was an accident and they may have passed or serious injury?
Yeah, always have your ID on you, okay? And the reason why I say that is because, there are people who still, like I said, they don't drive with their seatbelts on. They leave their wallets at home because they're just going right down the street, If you have no identification with you, and let's say you're borrowing your friend's car or something like that, like, we'll eventually find who had responsibility of driving that vehicle, but it's not fair to family. Right, so that's why I always have some form of identification with you, because we are going to search the car, the scene, to find out who you are. Because let's say, let's kind of break this up. Serious injury where you end up unconscious and you're transported to the hospital. All right, we want to tell someone that you're there. Otherwise, families going to be worried about you. They're going to start calling jails. I mean, we get phone calls. Hey, have you seen so and so? Have you arrested so and so? And we're like, no, we don't know who that person is. So we want to find out. But even in the event where someone loses life, all right, it's a fatality, we still want to know who you are, so that way we can make the death notification to family, so they're not worrying about where you're at. The quicker you get closure, it's almost better. So as opposed to waiting 3 days, we finally learn who you were because somebody filed a missing persons report.
That's terrible.
Right? So the sooner we can get closure to that family, the better it is for the situation.
Yeah.
Consider an app on your phone. Like, I'm not going to push any app over another one, but there are apps out there that will literally notify a loved one if you are in a collision.
Yeah.
It will. I know I had it on my kids, right, when they started driving. If they were in a collision, our app would let us know that they were in a collision.
Yeah.
Now they're grown up and they want their freedom, and they said, "Dad, take me off that app." But my wife and I still have the app for each other. So that way there's a little bit of peace of mind there. There are apps that you can pay for if you choose to pay for that service, and there are apps that are free, but you're having to deal with all the ads and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Choose something that works for you and your family and your situation.
Okay. Now, I've seen something on the iPhone, for instance, and I don't even know what button combo it is, but you push a button combo and it'll put emergency contact information.
Yeah, so what you do is you can either, so you take the power button on an iPhone. I don't know what you do for an Android, but I do know there's a version.
Yeah.
But you just push it 5 times and it pops up.
Yeah.
So you can do SOS emergency call, you can turn your phone off, or medical ID. I'm going to cancel this because the last time I accidentally did this, and Kearney police responded to the location where I was at. So I know it works.
Yeah.
But you can put your medical information in there. You can put allergies. You can put, like for me, I have asthma, so I can put that I have asthma on there, and they can, like, if I'm able to give them the information through my phone because I can't talk because I sustained some kind of facial injury or something like that. Right. And if I'm thinking about it, I would like to think I would, but you can hand off information like that. But if you're incapacitated, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So,
are officers looking at phones to find that information, or is that something predominantly like the apps are used to contact family members automatically?
So, that's another good question. So we are not looking. So to kind of like lay this out, law enforcement, I would respond. I would do an assessment and evaluation on the severity of the car crash, the condition that the person is in. If they're unconscious, I'm not looking at a phone. Like, I am getting on the radio, I'm saying, hey, get EMS here ASAP so we can get this person treated and transported.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, once the person has been transported and we now have the vehicle at the scene, we're going to try to find out who they are. Now, we'll probably do so because everyone carries their wallet in their back pocket or in their purse, so we'll go directly to that to try to find an ID. That ID, though, will go with the person because the hospital has to know who that is. And So we have to look at that information. Now, let's just say we have a phone. Now, you saw I didn't have to punch in a code to get that information. So all I have to do is just hit it 5 times, slide over on medical information, and then I can find all of their information if they put that information in there.
Right.
Quite honestly, let's find out. I don't even know what I have in mind. Okay, yeah.
You got it.
So there's my information. Emergency contact is my wife.
Yep.
It says that I have asthma, and I think I lied on my weight, but it's got my blood type.
Yeah, that's perfect. So what happens on the back end? Let's say that the person has been taken away by EMS, and now you just have the property there. You're trying to identify contact information. If you get that ID, what works on the back end? How are you then contacting the people? How do you find their numbers?
Yeah, so we have a few different ways of going about this. We'll do a general inquiry with our system to find out if we have any information on there. But then we also have like aftermarket programs that we subscribe to that gives us more information outside of like a criminal history, or if you live within Clay County,
Okay.
or Liberty or another municipality. We will eventually find out, where you live at, what your phone number is, but we have to know who you are, right? So that's why I say carry your ID everywhere you go. But when that happens, if they're incapacitated, what we do is we do a general notification, or we ask one of the police officers to do a notification if it's somebody like a car crash scene that we're working. Okay. And likewise, vice versa. So if a city is working a car crash involving a person who lives out in the county, they'll ask us to go and make the notification and let them know, hey, your loved one, your friend, typically a loved one, is at such and such hospital. They were involved in a car crash. Just wanted to let you know.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, going back to that morbid, right. Fatality scene. That's when it goes from general notification to death notification.
Yeah.
Because we want to give closure to the family as soon as possible.
Yeah, seriously, hats off to the officers that are going out and doing that stuff.
It is not easy.
Oh, I can only imagine the difficulty of, the responsibility of notifying and then consoling that person in one of the darkest times
Absolutely.
that they're dealing with.
We usually, I know for the Clay County Sheriff's Office, and I know other municipalities, they have chaplain programs, but we always try to reach out to our chaplains to either make the notification with us or just to be on standby in the event that a family member is asking for a member of clergy or something like that.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Whenever, and I will tell you, my wife is more of a risk-averse person than I am. Like when she sees something that causes her concern, she acts and tries to address it quickly. We'll see accidents, and she'll start picking up the phone and calling, loved ones and making sure, you okay, keeping tabs. So everything you're saying about the importance of time and making sure people are notified right away makes sense. It hadn't even occurred to me that you'd find out by a missing persons report.
Yeah.
Either days or potentially weeks.
I mean, fortunately, that doesn't happen too often, but, when somebody goes, quote unquote, missing, if they're an adult, sometimes adults want to go missing because of lifestyle or circumstances, or they were involved in a car crash where either they were unconscious or they lost their life.
Yeah.
Well, if the loved ones don't know, they're going to file that missing persons report because they want to know where their loved one is at. I don't blame them, but it actually helps us determine who the person is. But at the same time, that family had to go days without knowing, compared to if we know who the person is, we can make that notification within hours.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It almost makes me wonder, should people be putting things in their cars, whether it be like a letter in their glove box or something that could be an emergency point of contact? Or is the phone, what would be the best tool to...
So, absolutely. I mean, if you want to put like a red envelope or something like that, and just put emergency contact information, kind of like break glass during emergency, right? But to have that in there. Where to have it? Glove compartment. I mean, that's the most obvious place. You kind of, refresh my memory on a program called Vial of Life.
Okay.
So for our seniors, if they were on medication or if they were living by themselves, if they had some kind of medical condition, there was a vial that they could put all their information in there.
Cool.
And so if a family member who doesn't live nearby asks us to go and check on their loved one, and if we go into the house or we look through the window and we see them laying on the ground, well, that's not normal. We will gain entry to find out how we need to assist. Well, if somebody is transported because they're still alive, maybe they lost consciousness, maybe they fell, and all we know is what the person told us. We can actually, there's a sticker that either goes on the window or a magnet that goes on the refrigerator, and it lets us know where the information is at, because typically you want to keep it in the refrigerator or in a medicine cabinet or something.
Yeah.
We pop it open, pull it all out. There's their name, their information, emergency contacts, what medication they're on. So even before they leave with EMS personnel, that can be handed over to them. And so instead of trying to go through trial by error, they know exactly what is going on with that person's medical history, as opposed to just trying to figure it out on the way to the hospital.
Yeah, and that's a perfect analogy, because you may run into that situation if there's a serious accident where somebody's either not responsive or maybe they need that emergency medical care and you're not sure what blood type I saw, right? Or allergies or whatever else. You could give all the information so the treatment can be provided right away.
Yes.
Right. That makes sense. So just to recap, I guess, it sounds like when we're talking about accidents, we have the less significant, less severe, probably no injuries. Get the cars off if you can. If you can't get the cars off, if you can safely get yourself way off in the grass, and we're talking about 10, 15 foot.
Yeah, conduct business out there.
Yeah. Neck injuries, but serious medical injuries where you think you may be in harm, call the cops.
Just call 911.
Yeah.
Granted, it's not criminal in nature unless somebody flees from the scene of an accident or they're drunk, driving while intoxicated or something like that. But let us come out and control the scene through traffic control and assisting fire EMS, because it's not going to. The damage is already done, so to say. Let us help prevent more damage from being done.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then on the far serious sides where we have either somebody who's non-responsive or we may have a fatality, make sure to have that information available so that first responders can treat them, but also family members get notified so they don't have to wait to find out.
Absolutely.
Okay. That's perfect.
Yeah. And, I thinking about your question of, what kind of information is in there. Medical personnel, they have their protocols that they're going to follow. So I don't think it's as crucial to have that information in the glove compartment or maybe on the visor or something like that, because the protocols are going to be followed anyway. And the medics that are riding in ambulances, they're working with a doctor on staff while they're transporting. So they're getting orders to provide treatment as they're going out. And then when they finally get to the hospital, that's where the doctors, and with all the advanced life-saving equipment and stuff like that, can render aid. So I don't think it's so much as critical to have that information in your vehicle as it is to maybe have it on your phone or something like that.
Okay, makes total sense. Any parting thoughts for anybody that's tuning in?
If there's no injury, it is okay to drive your cars off the street and park in a parking lot.
Yeah.
And, if it's a simple fender bender, it's okay to drive off the street. The reason why I say that and I emphasize that is because if you want law enforcement to go out there and take a sketch, a drawing of a simple fender bender, some agencies, I'm not going to say that we're not going to do it, because if we're called to go out and do something, we're going to take care of what needs to be taken care of. But if there's no injury, if your vehicle's not disabled, and you drive off the roadway, you're making it better for everyone, to include yourselves, because you're making the scene safe for you. If you stay on the roadway because you want law enforcement to come out and do a police report or something like that, and you're slowing 1,000 cars down because it's rush hour traffic, it's going to make it worse. So I just want to emphasize, if you can move your vehicle safely off the roadway, it's okay. Go ahead and do it, because we can still do our job.
That makes total sense. And I appreciate you spending the time to talk to us about all of this. Sheriff, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
No worries.